Manners maketh man. Welcome to Watch, Review, Repeat. This is the podcast where two best friends discuss the latest in film and television, and then do it all over again the following week. My name is Colton Brown. Joining me is my best friend, Andrew Meadows. Andrew, how's everything going over in your neck of the woods?
Everything's going pretty good, man. I got to catch the Kingsman, the Golden Circle last night in IMAX, and aside from that, it's been a pretty decent week. How about yourself?
I would say it's been a little bit busier than I like to spend my weeks typically.
Been a little busy, huh?
Yeah, so I'm starting to unwind. I'm on my second beer.
Yeah, and just a public disclaimer: I'm on my third mixed Jack and Coke in a pint glass. Things get a little sloppy if I mispronounce names. I'm a little deep.
Sure, and to be fair, you're not good at that in the first place. So this just simply heightens, I guess, the problem.
Yeah, my illiteracy. I'm pretty illiterate for those who don't know me. Either way, what's going on this week in the news?
Well, I think probably the first thing that we got a while back was we got our first look at Alicia Vikander as Lara Croft in Tomb Raider. So this is coming to us from Warner Brothers. They released an official poster, and then we got an official trailer a couple days after that. I like Alicia Vikander. I think most people will probably recognize her as Ava from Ex Machina, which is a fantastic movie, and it stars your boyfriend Oscar Isaac in it, so of course you love it.
Absolutely. He was incredible. She was incredible. It was an incredible movie. My philosophy for actors and actresses is if you can play a robot who can simulate emotion and then shut it off, for me, it's a high point in your ability to act. Which might not necessarily be a high point, but I enjoy watching it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So Alicia Vikander is not playing a robot in this movie.
She's playing a badass.
She's playing a badass. Now, would you say that this movie looks badass? Was that your impression of it?
I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot to I didn't really gather a whole lot other than it looked just like the remake of the video game. I am thrilled that it's not Angelina Jolie. I don't know if that's a shared opinion or not, but I don't know. It looks intriguing enough, you know. I'll go out and see it.
Yeah, I didn't mind the Jolie films. They're not good, but you know, as far as video game movies are concerned,
they're better than Assassin's Creed, is what you're telling me.
I didn't see Assassin's Creed, so I can't even make that comparison. But the general trend is they're not so good. I've seen a couple of Resident Evil movies, so maybe I'll use that as my frame of reference. And let's just say they're at least from my memory, they're better than those. So.
Yeah, they do look better than those.
Yeah, this one kind of, Alicia Vikander, great. I'm excited that she's involved in this. That, to me, bodes well. The poster looks horrible. She's got like a neck that's like 3 feet long in it for some reason. I think it's just a horrible Photoshop on it. I don't understand. It's not like this is the first poster that's been released that is just filled with awful Photoshop or something like that. And it's just kind of like you've got a whole literal marketing team dedicated that are getting paid to do this job, and then you come up with this, and like this is your final product. It's just I have a hard time wrapping my head around it sometimes because I just don't get it.
Yeah,
I don't really have much else to add as far as Tomb Raider is concerned. It looks pretty run of the mill, I'd say, as far as movies are concerned. It doesn't look actively bad. It does definitely look very much in line with the couple recent Tomb Raider games that we got.
And they were good. I thought they were good video games. I mean, I thought they were cool, you know. But there just isn't a whole lot to gather from it. In other news, Linda Hamilton is set to return as Sarah Connor in the Terminator sequel.
Yeah. I mean, this is, I guess in some ways it's kind of cool to have, you know, the original Sarah Connor back.
Is it though? I mean, do we need Linda to come? I mean, how old is Linda Hamilton at this point? Do you know?
I could not tell you off the top of my head, but given when Terminator 1 and 2 were made, she was probably in her 20s. I mean, she's probably, oh God, math. She's probably in her 50s, 60s at this point, I would have to guess.
I don't need the same actress for I don't know. I would have been fine with a different actress taking the torch for this role, personally.
Well, I mean, presumably she's going to play an aged version of her character, in which case the only person that would look like an aged version of Sarah Connor would be Linda Hamilton.
Presumably, but isn't the movie about why the Terminator has the... I mean, I guess they can do anything. It's about timelines and shit. So, I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Well, I would say that, I mean, I don't know exactly what they're doing. I know we did talk about kind of what the speculation was as far as what this movie was going to be about. I don't know if that is still the case with this one. My assumption, and this could be off base, of course, is that if they're bringing back Linda Hamilton, we're going to see an older version of Sarah Connor.
Well, that would be okay.
You wouldn't bring her back to play a young version of it unless Ridley Scott is involved with this, as we saw in Prometheus, where he cast Guy Pearce to play an 80-year-old man. So, Ridley Scott's he's not done fucking up the Alien franchise. He's coming in for Terminator. Move over, James Cameron. I got this.
I want to make a Stranger Things season 3, and I want to cast all the people that played the kids in the episode, and I want to have them play themselves 60 years in the future.
Yeah, we're not gonna wait for the growth spurts to kick in either. We'll put them on stilts. We'll put the old man makeup on them. Yeah. The Duffer brothers have left Stranger Things after season 2. Ridley Scott swoops in to take care of it. Thanks, Ridley.
Jesus Christ, that's some stupid shit. Anyways, on to the next bit of news. I guess Wonder Woman's going to be in Flashpoint.
I think this had been rumored for a while, and so I guess a little bit of background on this for those who are kind of unfamiliar with what Flashpoint is. Flashpoint was this huge arc in the DC Comics world that basically rebooted the universe. So the Flash solo movie has been in the works for years now, but it's lost like 4 directors along the way for whatever reason.
It's important to note what the Flashpoint actually is, though. You know what I mean? It reboots the universe, but the Flash, who can run so fast that he can run back in time. Anyways, he runs back in time, and he manipulates the past, which creates an alternate timeline, and it just makes an alternate future, and that's how it reboots the universe. I reckon.
More or less, it does create the alternate universe, but then when he even tries to fix, he's like, okay, I realize that I shouldn't have done that. So he kind of goes back and tries to fix that, but he still created some permanent changes that were unintended consequences of meddling with the timeline. So yeah, that's most of it. But when everything does kind of snap back into place, it's not quite exactly as it was the way before. So yeah, so the Flash movie, like I said, was kind of something that has been in the works for a while, has gone through some clear behind-the-scenes issues, and it's kind of morphed into this Flashpoint movie now. Instead of just kind of being a solo adventure involving the Flash, it's kind of merged into this movie that, at least if it takes inspiration from the comic books, involves basically every major player in the DC universe. So obviously that would include Wonder Woman. So we really don't have a ton of details on what this movie will entail, other than presumably it's going to be somewhat inspired by the comic books, and could potentially lead to a soft reboot or full reboot of the universe. Again, it's too far out. I mean, if Justice League turns out to be as bad as it looks, wouldn't be surprising.
Hopefully Flashpoint reboots the DC universe. Maybe it's a fresh start.
If Gal Gadot is going to appear in it as Wonder Woman, maybe they'll keep her around. Like it'll get rid of everything else that happened, but it'll keep her around. It's like, oh no, we got her right. So everything that happened in her universe is also going to happen in this upcoming brand new universe that we're going to do.
And presumably they'll take the director, instead of Zack Snyder heading everything, maybe they'll take the director from Wonder Woman and have her do everything, and we'll get a whole new perspective on everything DC. That'd be good.
It doesn't have to be Patty Jenkins. I mean, she's obviously doing the Wonder Woman sequel, but just get people that know what the fuck they're doing. Like, it's as simple as that. Find that one person that clearly knows what they're doing and clearly has a nice unified vision for a universe, and you're not going to find that with Zack Snyder. And at this point, with Snyder having departed from Justice League for personal reasons, I think we might have reached our inevitable conclusion of Snyder being involved heavily in the DC world. But still, I don't know. They got some work to do, and I would like Justice League to prove me wrong. I'm not rooting for it to be bad. I think that's unfair. I don't root for any movie to be bad. I just, you call it the way you see it, and all the warning signs are there. All the red flags are popping up every time. Like, I know you feel the same way. Like, I think you're probably more negative on it than I am. I'm bullish on it because I'm like, I want it to be good.
It's not going to be good. It's going to be terrible. I know it's going to be terrible. I call it. On things that don't look so terrible, we got the trailer for The Punisher, though, and that looks pretty legit. I'm pretty excited about The Punisher.
Yeah, so this is our first kind of full look at it. John Bernthal as the Punisher. Yeah, this looks badass, and this trailer in particular is really well edited, and that helps sell it.
Man, that whole acoustic guitar thing was ridiculous. It was so good.
Well, it's got an incredible use of Metallica's One, and I appreciate anything that really kind of syncs, the beats to the actual music itself. I mean, Baby Driver was literally the poster child for doing that throughout the entire movie. So it's no coincidence that I like Baby Driver as much as I did. But this obviously is just for a 2-minute trailer, but it looks really cool. I know that John Bernthal is going to crush it because he's already crushed the role. So of course, it's just more of the same from him. But I mean, there's a couple sequences in here that look very John Wick-esque in terms of kind of how they're choreographed. And I know we talked about that last week as like, this should be the model for action sequences going forward. And to see that reflected here, it's kind of just like, all right, I think they're learning the right lessons. And so, yeah.
Choreographed gunplay, man. It goes a long way. It looks really good. And I think I have an unhealthy bias to the Punisher. I don't know. I've enjoyed him for a long time. You remember the video game?
Yeah, the video game is awesome. It was actually, I'd say it's actually better than the movie that it was kind of loosely inspired on. And I like the Thomas Jane movie. I like the movie. Thomas Jane himself is great as the Punisher. The movie is less good than he is in the role. But and of course we can't forget old Dolph.
Oh yeah.
He didn't have a skull on his chest, but he was still the Punisher. So. And that's actually not a bad movie, really.
And that super cammy one, what was that? Warzone, I think it was. Punisher Warzone.
Oh yeah, Ray Stevens seeing Punisher Warzone. Yeah, the motherfucker he jumps off the roof and then he gets blasted with a rocket launcher halfway through his flip from like one building to the next.
It was ridiculous. It was so good.
Yeah, that one's yeah, that one was a little too over the top for my liking. So.
Are you telling me you didn't enjoy Warzone?
It was enjoyable in the sense that, wow, this is some ridiculous shit. But let's just say that the tone that I get from this trailer for the Netflix series is much more what I want from a character like the Punisher.
That's fair.
But there is obviously a certain appeal to something like Punisher Warzone, and it clearly stride for something very different than what Steve Lightfoot, the showrunner for this show, is striving for.
It's a totally different experience, grounded in a totally different universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So it's in some ways perhaps unfair to make a comparison. I mean, they're just two very different interpretations of what is ultimately the same character. But he's spanned many decades in the comics, so there's lots of different angles to pull from. So it's only natural that certain people would pull their inspirations from different eras or from different sources. So
speaking of different interpretations, did you see the HBO news on the Watchmen?
Yeah. Speaking of old Zack Snyder, I guess, he obviously turned into an iteration of Alan Moore's very famous graphic novel Watchmen back in 2009 that in some ways was very faithful to the source material and in other ways diverged pretty heavily.
I enjoyed it, though.
Yeah. I mean, Watchmen, to be fair, is something that is very difficult, I think, to adapt. I mean, it's something that it's just got so many elements to it that to make it into a really cohesive, certainly as a feature film, I think makes it difficult. And I think that I'll give Zack Snyder as much shit as I want for Batman v Superman, but I do think that for the most part, he got it right with Watchmen, with certain exceptions. I think not all the casting was great. Silk Spectre and Ozymandias in particular were both definitely very miscast, but there were certain strokes of genius within that movie. Jackie Earle Haley as Rorschach, Jeffrey Dean Morgan as the comedian were both ridiculously good. And for the most part, it was faithful enough that it got a lot of the tone and stuff right. It just sometimes got bogged down with slow motion action sequences. The ending diverged pretty heavily, and I think didn't quite reach the same highs as the graphic novel did. But I'd agree. I think it was a fairly.
I haven't seen it in a long time, to be fair. But I remember thoroughly enjoying it, and I read the graphic novel at the same time I watched the movie, and I was impressed with it.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess you say we talk about Watchmen because HBO has greenlit they've greenlit a pilot for a television adaptation of the graphic novel. So this will be coming to us from Damon Lindelof, who most recently did The Leftovers, which I have not watched but have heard really good things about. Certainly for the last couple of seasons, it sounded like it kind of started off not great and then really found its footing by the second and third seasons and developed into something really, really great. He also was a co-creator on Lost, which gets some mixed reactions too.
I have seen neither. I'm excited to see Watchmen, though.
Yeah. And then, say, feature film-wise, he co-wrote Prometheus, Tomorrowland, and Star Trek Into Darkness, which I don't think any of those movies are particularly impressive to be on a writing resume. That said, it's not like he was the only writer on any of those movies, and a lot of films in particular take a lot of different turns and twists as they go through the production process. So
I really hope you're right with that guy writing Justice League, writing Star Wars, man. I hope you're right.
Yeah. I mean, the guy that wrote Batman and Robin back in the day won an Oscar for Beautiful Mind. So,
Oh, wow. See, that's such a good example.
Akiva Goldsman. Yeah. I mean, like so writing resumes can be all over the place.
God damn, son, I'm impressed. That was a good reference to pull out of your pocket right now.
And it's Batman related too. So
I'm thoroughly impressed.
I mean, yeah. So they have only greenlit the pilot for this. Whether or not it gets picked up for series still remains to be seen. I think Watchmen, I think I was kind of alluding to this when I was talking about Zack Snyder's interpretation of it, is that I think it's the source material lends itself, I think, far more towards a television show in terms of the medium, in terms of the format, than it would for a feature film, because there's so much to it, especially when you really think about, like the Tales of the Black Freighter stuff and all the other kind of little bits that are easily digestible in a comic book or graphic novel format, and less so in
that was totally. I never watched the. That was included in the director's cut, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think there's an ultimate cut of Watchmen that integrates like the animated version of that back into the movie, and I haven't seen that either, so I don't know exactly how well that flows. But given that the director's cut of the movie was, I want to say 3.5 hours, it's just one of those things like. You're getting into shaky territory here. I mean, Lord of the Rings can swing a 4-hour extended cut because of its quality, but you're getting into treacherous territory when you really start making things of that length. It has to be good to really earn your attention for that long. So
I'd be interested in watching those animated things, though. I remember thoroughly enjoying that in the comics.
Yeah, I mean they're not just asides. They're part of the story too. They're very heavily tied into, the mythos and the storytelling that Alan Moore is achieving within kind of the quote unquote main storyline of Watchmen. So it's not that you can't get rid of them, but they are relevant. So
they help push the story forward. In the comic books, it was very much a parallel story being told.
Exactly. As I said, it's something that, if you get rid of it, you don't necessarily lose anything of value, but by keeping it in there, you could potentially add something of value. So I don't know if that was the case for, like I said, the ultimate cut of Watchmen, given that neither of us has seen it. We can't really speak on that with any sort of authority, but it's certainly something that you probably have a better chance of incorporating a lot of those ideas into a television format because you have so much more time to play with.
And HBO's a wonderful platform to take the Watchmen. HBO, I can't think of other than Netflix maybe. Netflix would probably be an equally.
Well, even then, I think HBO is probably. I don't know. I think they'd probably both be willing to shell out a good amount of money on it, and I think you're going to need that first of all. But then you really kind of need to understand the tone of the graphic novel, which. Yeah, it certainly would not be appropriate for network television.
No, but, definitely not.
For HBO, Netflix as well. I mean, you definitely get a little bit more in line with how it should be. So this may not even come to pass as anything that we, as consumers, ever get to see. But I am curious, assuming it does. I mean, it's something that I think that HBO has probably thrown a decent amount of money at as it is. So it would follow that they would want to have a return on that investment. So if it does pan out, I'm sure we'll get a chance to kind of touch on it, but it's clearly a ways off at this point. So that should cover it for now anyway. Other TV news is over in the CW universe. of DC Comics. They've already announced that their big crossover event for all their shows that they have, which of course includes Supergirl, Arrow, The Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow. They've announced their crossover event's going to be titled Crisis on Earth X. Now, I guess before we kind of touch on this specifically, I know I'm caught up on all the CW DC TV shows. I think that you're slightly behind on some of them.
Yeah, I'm behind.
I think, I guess in the case of Supergirl, I think you've not really watched. I guess you've watched a couple episodes, but you haven't watched it from the beginning or anything like that.
The only episodes that I'm gonna attest to watching were the crossover episodes.
Right. So I guess this is something that I'm a little bit more excited about because I'm caught up on it, and I don't think that any of the CW shows are exactly amazing. I think The Flash season 1 is probably the high point overall, perhaps next to Arrow season 2. I think they all have different strengths and very different weaknesses, but yeah, I'm excited about this.
What is Crisis on Earth X?
Okay, so basically, the crossover is officially described as all the heroes are in town to celebrate Barry and Iris's wedding. And then villains from Earth X crash the festivities with a deadly agenda. So we got some artwork that accompanies this. So because it's like Earth X, what the fuck does that mean? Well, Flash has basically established that there are infinite Earths that have different versions of kind of the same people and characters that we know from the shows. So Earth X features from what appears to be Nazi versions of all these characters. And of course, CW actually is not afraid to get super topical with some of his episodes. I think Arrow season 5 in particular had one episode that really kind of hammered on gun violence, and it wasn't too over the top with it, but it was. Actually, I take that back. It was pretty on the nose with it, but I do wonder if they'll take this opportunity to kind of play out some political commentary of their own, given that there's been a rash of increased Nazi activity in America. So it wouldn't surprise me, but we'll just have to wait and see on it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is probably as good a time as any to transition over to our main topic for the week, which, as you mentioned already, is Kingsman: The Golden Circle. So this is, of course, a sequel to the first Kingsman, The Secret Service. Comes to us from director Matthew Vaughn, who also directed the first one, and kind of just picks up with the characters that we kind of met in that first one, and takes them into new and, in some ways, unexpected directions. So what'd you think about this one?
It's a stupid action movie, and it's I laughed my ass off through the entire movie.
So would you say that you enjoyed it?
I enjoyed the movie, yes. I think it's well made in the sense that in what it set out to achieve, it was very funny. I don't think it was, I don't know, it was incredibly over the top. I think the best way to classify the movie is probably almost like a Fast and the Furious movie, where it's just completely ridiculous, and it's I haven't seen the last Fast and the Furious movie, but it's very comedic. And I don't know. I don't think it's anything that really I can write home about being particularly good, but it was I don't know, I enjoyed it. I'll tell you this, I could have watched it on a normal theater with my movie pass, you know what I mean? And I would have been thoroughly much more happy about my purchase because I didn't have to spend anything on it versus spending $40 on it to go see it with another person in IMAX. You know what I mean?
Right.
But overall, I enjoyed the movie. I had a lot of fun with the movie, and I thought it was funny, and I thought it was fun. And it's a shallow movie. I think that's the best way to put it. It's shallow. It's funny. It's over the top. The action's cool. And then it falls flat. What do you think about it?
I think I'm probably a little bit less enthused with it. I think that your criticisms and your overall takeaway is pretty much on point, but I feel like I enjoyed it less than you did. Now, I do have to admit, I had a person behind me that was tapping their foot the entire movie.
God damn, that's the worst.
And so I spent a good time just kind of trying to not lose my shit over that. But I do think that a lot of it fell flat for me, and I think that's disappointing because I don't know if you ended up rewatching the first one, but I did pretty shortly before I watched this one, and I think that it's a significant step down in quality from the first one.
I didn't rewatch the first one. You showed me the first one, and I didn't catch it in theaters, and I thoroughly enjoyed the first one. I thought it was a really good movie. I will admit, though, I had somebody when we first said we were a little bit late, but we did catch the full movie. We got here in the middle of the Justice League trailer, and when I got there, there are people. You have the normal like candy and popcorn and just the sounds. You know what I mean? Sure. And it was totally drowned out by the audio in the theater I went to watch it at, so it wasn't a problem, but. Initially, they were. You could hear the boxes and the candy wrappers and stuff, and it just rubbed me the wrong way, and I instantly got pissed off about it. So I totally understand that somebody was tapping their foot behind you, and you getting pissed off. There's nothing worse than spending money to go watch a movie and getting aggravated by the people behind you. It's the worst. But aside from that, I haven't watched the first one in a long time, so you'll probably have much more valid comparisons between the first one and the second one than I will. Only because it's been so long and I've only seen the first one once.
Okay, yeah, I've seen the first one a few times, obviously very recently, but I mean, the first one was a very over-the-top movie as well, don't get me wrong, but this one I felt like it was almost too ridiculous at times.
Yeah, it was super ridiculous. Yes.
To the point where it almost, it took me out of the movie a couple times, where I'm just like, This is not resonating with me the way that certain things in the first one did. Like the first one, I really, really enjoyed the environment. I enjoyed the Kingsman, and perhaps because it was an introduction to the Kingsman, they kind of just eased us in, and they gave us a point of view character in Eggsy that has no idea what the fuck's going on with the Kingsman. So his reactions are our reactions as an audience. Whereas this one is just pretty much balls to the wall the entire time, and it just kind of just dives you into the craziness right off the bat and never really kind of lets up on the gas. In some ways, it presses further down on the gas. and I guess maybe I just didn't approach it with the right mindset in terms of kind of what I wanted out of it. I guess maybe I expected something more in line with the first one, whereas this one kind of just seemed to kind of step up the general zaniness of it overall. And so... even barring the fact that, foot tapping lady behind me was driving me insane, that I think that kind of just got me off on the wrong foot, I think, with a lot of the things that happened. So I think, you said you were laughing throughout. I think there were jokes that I recognized, like, oh, that's a joke, but I didn't laugh at them. I was just like, oh, that's supposed to be funny.
No. To be clear, the things that made me laugh were the ridiculous things. There's one scene in particular where he's drifting, like he takes this little taxi car, and then he pushes a button, and the car completely changes from a little taxi thing to a ridiculous like sports car thing, right? And there's a scene where he drifts in between all the traffic in the car, and then goes around the corner and then back in. I laughed my ass off. It was just completely ridiculous. And there's another scene in particular too where he has to follow this female lady, and he has to implant a tracking device.
Let's save that for later, because I have some thoughts on that too.
Okay, all right.
And they're not good.
They're not good. I thought it was completely absurd. Either way, I don't know. There was one very embarrassing thing with the cast. I probably won't admit on the actual podcast.
Well, we're recording right now. I know you're drunk and all, but this is live.
I thought somebody was who they were not.
Okay.
And I don't know why I thought they were that person playing the character, but there's an American person played by what's his name? It's Pedro something, right? What's his name?
Pedro Pascal?
Yes, he's incredible. That dude is incredible. And for some reason, I thought it was Justin Timberlake in the trailers and shit, but I don't know what happened. I don't know. I don't know why I thought it was him, but for some reason I did. And I was embarrassed in the movie because I went in thinking it was going to be Justin Timberlake, and I quickly realized it was not. And I don't know. What were your thoughts on the casting on this movie?
I'll tell you what, I thought the cast actually overall was pretty good. That said, I felt that certain actors were totally wasted in their roles in terms of what they were given to do or the lack thereof in certain cases. I think Taron Egerton as Eggsy here is he's great as he was in the first one.
He's the lead role though.
Yeah, exactly. He has a lot to do. Mark Strong as Merlin is really good too. Colin Firth continues to be good as Harry. I have some thoughts on that I don't know if you'll agree with me on that or not, but that's something I kind of want to touch on later in our spoiler section. The cast overall is really strong. Pedro Pascal, as you mentioned, is great too, and he had a big role in it, which I was really pleased to see. I haven't really seen him much other than Game of Thrones.
That dude's character was probably my favorite character in season 4. Or is it season 4? Are you sure for sure it's season 4?
Yeah, it's definitely season 4.
Okay. Season 4 was incredible because of that dude. I wanted to see that dude kick some ass. He was awesome. Pedro is a great actor and he needs more roles.
To be fair, I think he's in Narcos, which I haven't watched on Netflix, but...
I haven't watched Narcos either, okay? But I want to see more of Pedro because that dude is awesome. He was awesome in this movie, to be fair. I thought it was great.
No, I agree. And I say he's one of the few characters... or at least one of the few actors that really I think was given a character that had any sort of depth to their role. I think there's a few...
You had a big problem with characterization in the movie?
I did, and that's something I think that is probably more suited to our spoiler section, just because I don't want to get too specific with kind of who I'm referring to. But I think there's a lot of characters in this movie that fell flat for one reason or another. But it's not, and that's not to say that the cast is bad. I think even those characters that were given a disservice by how they were written or the lack of attention given to them, I think that they're all very well cast. So I'm happy with that. I think that's probably one of the strong points for me is, every character is enjoyable. I just think that there's a lot lacking with a lot of them that feels like wasted potential. In terms of other things that I think I enjoyed, were the action sequences. And they're definitely not quite the John Wick level of choreography that I mentioned that I wanted to be the model, but I do enjoy kind of the over the top.
Yeah.
The way that Matthew Vaughn films and stylizes a lot of these action sequences. Do you feel the same way on that? I mean, is the style, is that something that jives with you?
Absolutely. The style of the movie was great. The character of the movie was great. I thought just the flavor of the movie. I thought it was outstanding. I thought it had a lot of character to it. I think it's definitely a Matthew Vaughn movie. You can tell it's Matthew Vaughn if you've watched any of his previous stuff. And one thing that in particular that I noticed was the soundtrack to the movie. I thought the soundtrack was great and how it was incorporated throughout the movie. But if we're talking strictly action sequences, everything is incredibly over the top. It's fun. It's ridiculous. And if you want to watch a movie and just be, I don't know, mindlessly entertained by the action sequences, I think you're going to see the right movie. I think it's fun.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest redeeming factor of this movie is that when it does get to the action sequences, and there are a few of them, but I think overall the pacing of the movie is not great, and so it feels overlong as a result. But when it does get to those sequences, I think that's where it does shine because I really enjoy the style that Matthew Vaughn brings to the table in terms of framing these action sequences, and we saw it in the first one. That you have that big church sequence, which is just fucking madness. And I don't think there's anything in this movie that quite lives up to that, but I don't know that they necessarily tried to do that either. So,
and to be fair, this is not a sequel that you can go in and watch without watching the first one. I think there's a lot of callbacks to the first one that are only appreciated unless you watch the first one. So don't go see this movie unless you've seen the first one, because you're going to miss out on a lot of innuendos and a lot of those character plots and everything else. It's very much a continuation of the first movie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you'd lose out on the value of especially Eggsy's character, who gets much more characterization in the first one than he really does in this one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, without elaborating too much, I fully agree with you. This is definitely something that is fully reliant upon its predecessor, setting the table for really what they do with a lot of this.
Which in many ways is a stronger movie as well. The first one's a stronger movie.
Well, the first one the first one could have worked on its own. And usually that's a good sign in terms of kind of being a well-rounded movie is... this one, it has things that works for it, but viewed as a kind of an isolated entry, there's things that will fall flat because it's so reliant upon something else that you need to be familiar with or at least cognizant of. And if you're not, then you're kind of just left scratching your head at a lot of it. And to be fair, I was scratching my head at a lot of it anyway. So, it kind of doubles down on that, I think, where there's things in this that I think that could work on their own, but they really kind of rely on outside factors from the first movie to kind of really kind of drive home the point. And whether they do or not, I guess is up for interpretation. I think that for a lot of it, I didn't feel that way, but I guess that's kind of my takeaway from this movie. As kind of a last note for our non-spoiler section, is that I think the overall plot and the characterization in this one, partially as a consequence of being so reliant upon the first movie in some ways, it's just a goddamn mess. I mean, I don't know a better way to say it other than it is all over the place. It's over the top, and the first one was also equally over the top in terms of kind of its plot, but at least did it in a way that I felt that it was topical without being too ridiculous with it, and it was also, consistent within its own realm, whereas this one just feels like it had way too many ideas that it tried to throw at the wall, and I think that it would have been far better suited to scaling it back and taking a little bit more simpler approach than it did. So perhaps that's just a personal quirk that I found with it, but I just felt like there was just way too much going on in this for its own good. And to be fair, I've seen this kind of touted about a lot, is that, this is effectively a parody of the spy genre in general. And so people have kind of likened the first one to being akin to the Sean Connery era of James Bond films. Which were largely self-serious with some problematic tropes, certainly in terms of how they characterized women.
That's definitely apparent.
You're right, right. So in some ways it is lampooning that, yes, but it seems like it almost falls victim to it in the same way that those did to some extent. And again,
yeah,
we'll talk about that later. Whereas say this one was kind of more in line with the Roger Moore style of James Bond, where things got, you got ridiculous gadgets for everything under the sun. Just got a lot of moments that are just kind of like, this is so ridiculous, so over the top. Like, it just feels like such a different world than, what you saw in those Sean Connery Bond movies. And in some ways it is, but for something that is technically within the same franchise, it kind of just feels like, well, if we're going to draw that James Bond comparison, I like the Sean Connery Bonds. The Roger Moore ones are where it kind of loses me.
I'd agree with that.
And so I think I think that extends to this one, where I'm just like, I kind of, I get that if that's what you were intentionally trying to do, I get it, but I don't enjoy it. Like, I don't want to see that. Like, that's not what I'm here for. Like, you don't have to make the same movie over again, but I think that keeping it stylistically consistent with the first movie would have been a far better approach than trying to intentionally get so ridiculous with it. I feel like I'm using the word ridiculous way too many times, but
well, that's the best way to characterize the movie. It's completely absurd.
I don't know. A lot of it just fell flat for me because of that.
I tell you one thing I particularly enjoyed was the political commentary. They used the president in this movie, and the president in the movie is just hysterical. I laugh, like I said, I laughed my ass off the entire movie. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I guess I haven't thought about it a whole lot. Just because we're recording this so soon after I've seen it. But like I said, I laughed my ass off the entire movie. And I don't know if that might be better kept for the spoiler section. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let's do that right now. Unless you have any other notes to add, we want to get in spoilers.
Yeah, we'll get into spoilers. That's probably best.
All right. So let's go ahead and mark this full spoilers right now for Kingsman: The Golden Circle.
So the president, the premise of the movie is every drug user in the world is somehow getting drugs from the same person, which is Julianne Moore's character, and they start suffering from these. They get these blue veins when they ingest the drugs of choice, provided by the main character, right?
Main villain, yeah.
The main villain, okay. And so there's the president of the United States is I don't have the notes in front of me, but the guy that plays the president of the United States,
Bruce Greenwood's the actor that plays him. I don't remember what the president was called.
Oh, and I thought he was great. I thought he was great as the president. His whole premise is if they're using drugs, fuck them. I don't care. Fuck them. We win the war on drugs. I win the war on drugs if these people die. And I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was great. Like I said, I laughed my ass off. I don't know how else to explain it. Did you enjoy the president?
You know, I in some ways I thought, again, it was so ridiculous and so over the top. I'm like, on one hand, I was just kind of like, okay, you know, Matthew Vaughn is a Brit. You know, he's kind of taken his perspective on American politics and you know, kind of amping him up to match the tone that the rest of this movie has. And so I was kind of just like, this kind of, I don't know, it was like, this feels odd. But at the same time, you know, I take a step back and I'm like, honestly, like, this is fucking American politics right now. Like, this like, this is probably how everyone else perceives America right now. Like, this.
That's how I perceive it.
Exactly. So when we're looking at this and like, oh, that's so ridiculous, and we're laughing at how goofy it is, I'm just like, no, that's how everyone else sees us right now. So yeah, that's probably pretty on point.
It was a perfect satire. It was a perfect satire on U.S. politics. I thought it was great.
Yeah, and the first one got pretty political too. It was more dealing with climate change, and Samuel L. Jackson's character was, you know, his whole point was that the world is, you know, there's a sickness, and the only way to really cure that sickness is to get rid of so many people that are polluting it effectively, was kind of the whole point. So that one was also topical, but in a way that
it was much more subtle.
It was subtle, and I don't even know that it was subtle. Having watched it recently, I don't think it was subtle.
It had to be much more subtle than this fucking guy.
It didn't feel. I guess perhaps it didn't feel as much as a slap in the face as this one did. You know?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I thought it was hilarious. The moment that guy says, "Hold on a second, what's the problem? This lady's trying to kill all the drug users." Well, fuck them. They're drug users. Fuck them. We win. Am I wrong? And he had, you know, I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was great.
I'll tell you what really fucking pissed me off in this movie is that they invoked probably one of the most overused and probably one of the worst tropes in history of really anything, and that's fridging characters. No, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but just to kind of familiarize our listeners, if nothing else, there's a trope basically called stuffed into the fridge, where a character is killed off in some manner and is left to kind of be the motivation for a character to take revenge against the villain or anything kind of along those lines. And this one, basically, this is something for me that I kind of felt strong about because I just watched the first one, but pretty much 15 minutes into this movie, 20 minutes, you know, the Kingsman building gets, you know, a bunch of missiles sent at it, so it gets totally destroyed, and then Roxy, who is Eggsy's kind of best friend, she's Lancelot within the Kingsmen, you know, she's dead. His dog is dead. Everything that he knows is dead except for Merlin. And I felt like this was just such a cheap plot device that really undermines the first movie, that it really, honestly, I do think that, and I expected it walking into the movie because she was noticeably absent from all the marketing material, which is usually a bad sign for being in the movie. But it was one of those things that was like, hopefully they just have some sort of alternative explanation for why she's not in this movie, other than we're just going to kill her and use her as motivation for the main character to get revenge on the bad guy. I mean, the first movie goes out of its way to make Roxy a pretty compelling character, in terms of, you know, she's not a love interest. You know, she's a badass. Like, she's the one that straight up earns the Kingsman spot over Eggsy because she's the one that proves herself more than he does. And even within this movie, you know, the time that she does get in this movie, we see her as, you know, they're equals, they're best friends, they're partners in some ways, and to kind of just piss that away, it just feels like such a cheap way to write this that it did kind of color my viewing of this movie, because I just felt like if they're going to resort to such cheap tropes, then it's clear that the effort here is not what it should be.
Well, I agree with you. That's fair. She was very involved throughout the whole first portion of the movie. You know what I mean? She's the whole reason why Eggsy succeeded with the family that he was trying to succeed with. Who's the whole reason he succeeded? You know what I mean? It was I don't know. I agree with you. I didn't think about it because I haven't watched the first one in so long. You know what I mean? But no, now that you bring it up, I completely agree. It is cheap.
And to kind of follow up on that, this might just be a hot take from me, but I think that bringing back Colin Firth's Harry Hart character was a huge mistake.
They leaned on it very heavily.
They did lean on it very heavily, and I think for the worst, because it bogged down most of this movie with trying to explain how this guy got shot literally in the head and then came back. Like, you know, there's these goofy plot devices like, oh, this can magically repair a character who gets shot in the head. I'm like, if you have to go to those lengths to bring back a character that people liked, like, you shouldn't have killed him in the first place. Like, you need to stick to your guns and let that kind of be the way that things happened. Like, I just feel like it undermines a lot of what happened in the first movie in terms of, you know, Harry dying was kind of a big shocking moment that did provide motivation for Eggsy to kind of take his revenge against Valentine, much in the same way that you might interpret Roxy's death in the Golden Circle provides motivation for Eggsy to take his revenge against the villain here. But the difference there is that Harry's death happens probably 2/3 of the way through the movie, and it also happens at a point where Eggsy already has plenty of motivation against Valentine, the villain of the first movie, so it doesn't really fall into the same tropes that Roxy's death does in this one. And also, you know, Harry's character is a fully realized character with a fully realized arc in that movie. In terms of, you know, Eggsy's father was someone that sacrificed his life to save Harry, and so Harry effectively sacrifices his life to bring Eggsy into being the best Kingsman that he could be. And so, you know, his arc is done. You know, there's nowhere to really go with them except...
It complemented the story, whereas in this case, it bogged it down.
Exactly. And it's just one of those things where, you know, clearly he's a popular character, and it's fun to have Colin Firth back. Colin Firth is great at this role. Like, I understand why there'd be a natural desire to bring him back, but you got to think about things from the terms of the story. And I think first and foremost, you need to serve the story, to really kind of make something that's compelling, and that's to make a story that feels like a natural evolution of what happened in the first one. And so by bringing Harry back, you know, they spend a bunch of time talking about his amnesia and trying to bring him back up to speed, and it's just something that doesn't feel necessary for the storyline, because I'm trying to think, and I just watched this, I'm trying to think, like, is there anything in this movie that really suggests that Harry being involved, his character and being involved is so central to the storyline that it couldn't be served by just giving what he does to another character, namely Roxy? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, Roxy would have been a perfect choice to
like, is there any reason other than behind the scenes, you know, Colin Firth is a big name, people liked his character, we'll bring him back, that's an obvious thing to do. You know, beyond that, in terms of serving the story and purely serving the story, is there any reason that what he did in this movie couldn't have been given to Mark Strong's character, couldn't have been given to Sophie Cookson's character, Roxy? Like,
the only purpose that Harry brought to the entire story of the movie was spotting the traitor. That's the only thing that character brought to the entire thing.
Right. And I'm thinking throughout the, you know, I was, you know, as I'm saying what I was just saying about, I was like, yeah, that's like the one big contribution that he has is, like, you know, he's back in the game. Like, that's the one thing he spots, and that Eggsy is like, oh, nah, man, you're just all sorts of fucked up. You don't know what you're doing. But I mean, there's no reason that you couldn't have written that in a way that one of, you know, that Eggsy is much more willing to trust, you know, the whiskey character, and then, you know, the Roxy character. She was the one that won the Kingsman position in the first place. Like, if she's the one that spots it and calls him out on his shit, and then Eggsy's like, what? No, I don't agree with that. Like, there's no reason you couldn't write it that way. There really isn't.
Right.
And I guess I just find it frustrating, because I look at a lot of this movie, and there's a lot of things in it that I'm just thinking, this could have been written a different way. And I guess it's kind of dumb to point it out. That I was like, if this movie was entirely different, it would be better. You know, that's kind of a sweeping generalization to make, but I see the parts where I think that they took the wrong direction, and And I just I don't know. I guess, there's just a lot of things that kind of like I was saying that I don't know. Channing Tatum, like, why is he in this movie? You know what I'm saying? Like, he literally is in this movie for like, we get introduced to the statesman. He has like one scene where he's like, it shows off his skills. And then he just literally gets put on ice for the entire movie. And it's just
literally put on ice.
Like, what why is he in this movie?
He did dance pretty good. There was one scene where he danced pretty good.
Yeah, okay. There was that one scene that was pretty good. I don't know. I guess let's bring this conversation, I guess, kind of back to what you were talking about earlier with a there's a scene where Eggsy has to implant a tracker in a certain mucous membrane of a character that he encounters at a music festival in Glastonbury, and oh boy,
it was completely ridiculous. Oh my goodness.
I'll let you take this one.
You want me to take this one?
Oh, you're the one that started talking about it earlier, so it's only fair.
So the whole premise is this tracking implant or whatever, this tracking device has to be implanted through a mucous membrane. Well, your choices is, and the whole thing is, it looks like a condom, but it's a very small condom, and it goes on the finger. And then when you put this condom on your finger, you have to put the condom in some sort of orifice that will let you implant the tracking device attached to the condom. So you can put the condom on your finger and stick it up her nose. You can put the condom, stick it in your mouth, or you can put the condom, stick it somewhere else. And it's completely over the top. It's absurd. It's just completely ridiculous. I laughed my ass off yet again. I thought it was completely. Elton John's another example. Elton John was kidnapped by the main villain, or by the villain, and made to play piano pieces in her villain bass. You know what I mean? And it's absurd. And Elton John's constantly calling people fuckers and pieces of shit and everything else. I ate it up. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was great.
The Elton John one, more specifically, I thought was kind of funny until they used the same gag like 15 times.
Yeah, they used it quite a bit.
I was just like, all right, we get it. It's Elton John. Like, that was kind of the whole joke, is like, look, it's Elton John in this movie. Woo! But yeah, the whole situation with the implanting of the tracker, why would you write that into the movie? It's like they had this issue in the first movie. There's like the ending part where, the princess that he encounters is like, if you save the world, we can do it in the asshole. And he's like, ooh, okay, let me go save the world. I'll be right back. And people kind of got in a tizzy about that, because it was just like, what? And to be fair, I think at least in the case of the first one, I think that Matthew Vaughn, at least his intent was to kind of, lampshade the whole Sean Connery approach to women, in terms of the James Bond movies, where, they're kind of just trophies for saving the day. And so I think it was kind of reflective of that.
I don't know what the fuck it was reflective of, but
yeah, so for the first one, I was kind of just like, it's tasteless, but I guess I kind of see the intent. It did need to be in there. It didn't really add anything necessarily. It was just kind of like a, okay, moment. Whereas this one was just like, oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? You got away with it once. Like, don't do it again.
It was a completely drawn out thing in this movie. It was it was like a whole 15-minute segment of the movie. You know what I mean?
Shit, it was a literal plot device for him breaking up with his girlfriend. Like, what? Maybe that's what it was in. They're like, we need to figure out how to break up with his girlfriend to increase some dramatic tension. Oh, maybe he has to finger a girl to implant a tracker. Like, what? What? No, let's not do that.
Anyways, they did the whole thing where like the implant went like into the vaginal orifice, and it was
and I mean, there was like a, it wasn't like a super graphic shot or anything like that, but they didn't cut away. I think when I thought they were going to cut away, I figured just kind of be implied, and they're like, oh, here's like a little visualization of what's going on in here. I'm just like, okay. I guess that tracker got implanted, didn't it?
Oh man,
It just, why does that need to be in the movie? it's written it's written deliberately that way. Like putting tracking devices on people is not a new concept. So I don't, again, it's possible that they're just trying to kind of go for a parody thing with how over the top it is, but I don't know, man.
It was pretty over the top.
It rubbed me the wrong way. I just was not feeling it. Let's just put it that way.
What'd you think about Julianne Moore's character?
Poppy,
yes.
I just kind of, I feel like Julianne Moore gave it what she could. I just kind of felt like her character didn't have any sort of depth to it.
I liked her dogs.
Her little robot dogs.
Yes, I got very much a Wolfenstein feel out of the whole thing with the fucking robots.
Yeah, I kind of. I mean, again, I think that ties into what I was talking about. How this just felt much more over the top than the first one. Like the first one, I don't think we'd see robot dogs at any point. This one, I just kind of, I don't know. I just, robot dogs was kind of a step too far.
And see, you watch the first one so recent, you know what I mean? And then you step into the next one. I walked into this one expecting a ridiculously over the top thing. You know what I mean? Because I hadn't seen the first one in so long. And that's exactly what I got. And I don't know if I was laughing at the wrong reasons, but I found myself laughing at the entire movie. Even the things that weren't necessarily like jokes or whatever. I didn't. The perfect example is the thing where he's doing that. He's taking that car, you know what I mean, all the way around the curve, and it was just completely absurd. It didn't make any sense. It was crazy. The whole movie is just absurd. It's ridiculous. And I enjoyed it. Now, to be fair, I'm not going to tell you to go out and watch this movie in theaters. Don't go out and spend the money I spent to go watch this thing in an IMAX theater. It's not, by no means is it worth it at all. How would you recommend this movie to somebody else?
Well, I say this as someone that really enjoyed the first one. It really pains me to say that I cannot recommend you see this in theaters. That said, I think that there are enough redeeming qualities in it in terms of the cast given it their all, in terms of the action sequences, and for some people, maybe this tone might resonate more than it did with me. I think there's enough there that I could say that this is something that I could recommend people wait for the Blu-ray to check out. I don't think it's egregiously bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just think that it's something that I wanted to click in the way that the first one did, but it just didn't end up working out that way. And so by that token, I think that there's enough here that people could enjoy it based on its own merits, certainly more than I did. So yeah, I'd say wait for Blu-ray. That's my recommendation. How do you kind of line up on this one?
I would 100% agree. I think it's entertaining enough to where I wouldn't necessarily warrant just streaming it, especially if you have any sort of investment in the first movie. I would say that it's worth buying. It's a decent movie. It's fun. It's entertaining. I'd say buy it on Blu-ray. That's what I would say. I wouldn't go out and watch it in theaters. I especially wouldn't go watch it out in theaters if you haven't seen the first one. It's not one of those movies where you can kind of pick off what you need to and move forward with the movie. It's definitely very heavily involved from the first one. So definitely a Blu-ray movie, not a streaming movie or get paid to watch it or anything like that. I mean, it's a decent movie. I enjoyed it. I laughed my ass off throughout the entire movie. I thought it was okay. I think the movie is okay. That's how I would describe it. It's a fun, ridiculous action movie. Don't go in expecting anything other than just a stupid action movie, because that's what it is. It's a stupid, funny action movie. That's all it is.
With a largely charming cast.
Yeah.
And an uncomfortable sequence in Glastonbury.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's Kingsman: The Golden Circle.
What have you been up to this week?
Well, I think I kind of briefly touched on it earlier, and I've been fairly busy, so I admittedly have not been doing as much as I would have liked to be doing. Things that I did do, I did get a chance to go see It again.
How was it the second time?
I really enjoyed it the second time. I saw it in IMAX this time, and that really, for me, emphasized the score and the sound design of it more than I think I did the first time. I think the first time I was dealing with a lot of opening night crowd kind of issues where people were just like, reacting to every little thing, and so I couldn't really pick up on a lot of the subtleties. So I think the second viewing really helped me with that, and I really, really enjoyed it. I don't really think I need to add any more thoughts than kind of what was already contained on our episode on it. But it's good shit. It's good shit, and it's only elevated by the IMAX format. And then the only other thing that I have somewhat watched is American Vandal on Netflix. Do you know anything about this?
Nothing.
Okay. So it's a mockumentary kind of styled around like the Serial podcast and How to Make a Murderer, like shows like that. And so it's about a crime that happens at a high school where someone spray paints like a bunch of penises on the employees' cars, the faculty cars. And it plays it super seriously, where they're doing like a big documentary investigation of who drew the dicks, and it's hilarious. I've watched 3 episodes out of 8, so I'm not all the way through. But a particular note, there's a sequence in episode 2 where they show like an animatic of kind of like, well, this scenario happens. I don't want to get too in depth with it because it's worth watching, and when you get to this point, you're just I was losing my shit. It was fantastically hilarious, and it's pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to watching the rest of it, and hopefully I'll get a chance to do that over the kind of the nenext week or so I can get a little bit more in depth with it.
It's only 8 episodes.
Yeah, it's only 8 episodes, and they're 30 minutes each, so it should be pretty easy to blow through it. But I've just been busy and I haven't had time to kind of do it between everything else I've been trying to worry about. So that's kind of what's on my docket, other than what I talked about last week. I think I mentioned Project Octopath Traveler, which I didn't get a chance to play.
I did.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's say that's it for me. So yeah, your turn. What you got?
Well, I downloaded Project Octopath Traveler. Actually played through the Dancer today. Actually watched it got played through today. I didn't actually physically play through it, but it definitely is it's got an intriguing art style. The score is worth noting. But the action in the game is pretty cool.
Okay.
It's normal.
Is it turn-based?
Yes, turn-based. Yes, it's turn-based combat. But it has enough systems within the game to keep it intriguing, keep it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most noteworthy thing is the art style. They do kind of like a side-scrolling kind of 2D deal. But the background and the lighting's very artistic and it's very nice. Aside from that, though, I've been watching. I've slowly been inching my way through the Handmaid's Tale. Which is excellent. It's very, very, very tense.
You don't win 8 Emmys for nothing. So
it's true. It's incredibly tense. It's at some points it's uncomfortable to watch. But it's a very good show. I'd highly, highly, highly recommend it. I'm in the 3rd episode so far, so I haven't gotten too far in it. But from what I've seen, it's an incredible show. It's definitely worth watching. I did watch a couple episodes of Game of Thrones this week. Watched the Hodor episode, which I don't know if anybody's watched that or not. I'm sure everybody has except me, but
hold the door.
Yes, it was.
Hold the door.
It was kind of I don't know, just kind of hit me in the feels. It was a little rough.
Yeah, that'll get you.
Huh?
Said that one will get you.
That one will get me. Yeah, it was pretty good. Aside from that, though, I've been playing through some Mario Rabbids a little bit, and some Metroid, just inching my way through everything this week. I've got a slow pace on everything I'm trying to digest at the same time, so episode here, episode there, one level here, one level there kind of deal, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Aside from that, that's what I'm inching my way through. I don't think I'm going to pick anything else up until I finish Game of Thrones and Handmaid's Tale and the 2 video games I've been playing most recently. So that's all I've got for you this week.
All right. Well, we want to say thank you again to our listeners for tuning in. We always appreciate any support that we can get. So if you're just listening, that's fantastic. If you have any feedback, suggestions, questions, comments, anything like that, to send us, feel free to do so at our email account. That's going to be watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. So we'd love to hear anything from you guys. There's other ways to engage us, of course. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You can find all the information for that over at our main webpage at watchreviewrepeat.com. It's got everything you're going to need for us. Our intro and outro track is licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. The track is called Mechanolith, created by Kevin MacLeod. And that's pretty much it. That's our kind of usual spiel for the end of the episode. Andrew, you want to add anything?
Be sure to tune in next week for American Made, starring the cruise missile Tom Cruise.
Yeah, cruise missile. I always like me some cruise missile, so I'm excited about this one. And it's got some Donald Gleason as well, who I'm taking a liking to as well. So
we'll see how it is.
Yeah, that should be a fun episode.
I actually think that episode's going to be recorded live in the man cave, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'll be hanging out. I'll be hanging out with you for a little while. I'm coming up on a couple of weeks of leave, so I'll be hanging out with you for a little while. Then I'll be heading out to Texas for a week or two. But fear not, listeners. We will maintain our regular recording schedule, and you'll be able to hear us every week. And yeah, we've got some good topics upcoming for the next few episodes. So look forward to that episode next week for American Made. And until then, I hope you have a swell week.
All right, man. Until next week. Manners maketh man.